All right, folks. Everybody ready to get started? We are gavel-free tonight. Enjoy the silence. So I'm going to call to order the Wednesday, May 7th MVIC meeting. And we're going to begin with public comment. So if there's anyone in the audience that wants to speak to us for 3 minutes on issues for which a prior public hearing has not been held before the Board of Directors, you're welcome to come forward at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee and staff present. Ted Hyde with Bicycle Colorado. Just wanted to thank you all today, staff included, of course, for your efforts and your leadership to get us where we are as of today in the TIP update process. It's taken leadership. I know it's taken a lot of energy, including your time. So thank you for that. I think, having been witness to this for the last 7+ months, a lot of good discussion, a lot of good critical thinking, a lot of good collaboration amongst y'all. So I've really appreciated that. As I think we think about the policy changes that you've discussed, those that are on the table for tonight, it's exciting and promising to think about as we continue to collaborate as a region on a truly multimodal transportation system. So as envisioned in MetroVision and in the regional transportation plan, thinking about how the policy changes we continue to consider and are proposed for the TIP update will really truly allow for that multimodal transportation system, and one that accommodates motorists, pedestrians, bicyclists, transit users, scooters, and increasingly I see them out there, skateboarders. Seem to be an increasing number of them. I didn't mention jetpacks. Thank you, Phil. I appreciate that. So, and get the thumbs up from Don. So thank you for your consideration of these policy updates as we strive for that multimodal transportation system that truly will benefit all member governments and jurisdictions in the region. We appreciate it. So thanks for your leadership and your forward thinking. Thanks.
Thank you.
Will Tour with the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project. Great to see everyone today. And I would also like to speak to the TIP criteria that you are developing and considering this evening. And first wanted to say that, overall, I think that the proposed criteria really make a lot of sense and are a good step forward in moving the TIP forward in alignment with the policy goals of MetroVision. There were a couple of areas that I wanted to highlight where I think there might be some fine-tuning that would be useful. One is in the multimodal connectivity points. Again, overall, I think that the proposed changes to the multimodal connectivity make a lot of sense. One of the elements is around being able to add transit lanes and the points that you get for adding transit lanes. There was a restriction that those transit lanes had to be under 1,800 feet. The proposed language would remove that restriction, which I think makes sense. You very seldom would build transit lanes that were under 1,800 feet. I also think it may make sense to increase the number of points given for those transit lanes. Right now, the proposal is that you can get 8 points for a protected bike lane and 4 points for adding a transit lane. I would suggest that, while both are important, that a transit lane is probably equal in significance to a protected bike lane, and that both of them should be considered for up to that 8 points. The other area that I wanted to highlight was in roadway operations. Right now, both roadway capacity and roadway reconstruction, the measures of the value of the project are based upon person miles of travel, but in roadway operations, it is currently based upon vehicle hours of the reduction in vehicle hours of delay rather than in person hours of delay. And I think for consistency, both with MetroVision policies and with the other two categories, it would make sense to focus on the person hours of delay that are reduced by the project rather than just the vehicle hours of delay. And in some corridors where you may be having significant transit ridership, it could give a very different result. And with that, thank you very much, and good luck with your deliberations.
And Will, is the autograph table going to be out in the hall later?
Probably not. I'm probably not going to stick around till the end of the meeting.
Yeah, rub it in. Thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak to us tonight? Seeing no one else, we'll close the public comment and move on to the summary of the April 2nd meeting. We don't need to approve the minutes, but are there any comments or edits for clarification? All right, then I think we'll move on to the action items. So number 4, the project location related MetroVision implementation evaluation criteria. And Brad, I think you're going to lead us through this one.
Hopefully I'm going to get time for 2 agenda items with you tonight, and I have 1 PowerPoint later, but I'm going to do this sans PowerPoint right now. So just so that you're obviously aware, there are 2 action items associated with the agenda tonight, both TIP related. Just to give you a little bit of variation as to what's going on between the 2, this item is really kind of a cleanup item to really address one particular set of criteria, and then what Doug's going to follow me with to talk to you about is sort of the entire set of overall project evaluation criteria that this committee has been working on for months and months and months. Many of the high-level policy conversations you've already had, but you're going to sort of see the sort of full set of evaluation criteria here in a little bit. So a little recap as to why this is in front of you today, and hopefully it was explained pretty well in the memo, but just kind of the bullet points. Previously, NVIC gave direction to staff that about 25% of the overall TIP criteria should be associated with sponsor and project-related implementation of MetroVision. Last month, this group decided to remove all references to strategic corridors in the TIP criteria, and that was 4 points. And so the feeling was to go back and honor that 25% commitment, we need to go back and add 4 points to the section that ultimately had the strategic corridors removed. And so that's really what's in front of you today, is to think about reallocating those 4 points to what was previously known as Appendix F, the project-related implementation of MetroVision. And so that's really what we're here to talk to you about today. Obviously, there's a proposal in front of you, but I did want to spend a little bit of time very quickly kind of telling you about a few things that we considered in thinking through this in terms of what recommendation we would make, but we ultimately did not move forward with. As part of the MetroVision 2040 process, we've been doing tons and tons and tons of stakeholder engagement to really talk about what should this region be in the year 2040 and how do we get there. Unsurprisingly, it many times comes back to the conversation of, well, how does our transportation improvement program ultimately begin to help us achieve those goals? We've heard several consistent messages that we considered about trying to include in this criteria. One of the topics that we heard pretty consistently was the topic of health and how we can create plans and programs that ultimately really do incorporate health into what we do. If you think about that from the TIP standpoint, that oftentimes comes back to thinking about active transportation projects, emphasizing bicycle and pedestrian projects. And so we gave quite a bit of thought to that, but one of the reasons we didn't want to carry this forward at this point for you all is that one of the things that's interesting about how we select projects is we compare like projects to each other. So the simplest thing that you could do is just give bonus points to a bicycle or pedestrian project, but since they're competing against each other already, that ultimately becomes a wash. And so the other thing that is, from a policy perspective, in terms of thinking about really emphasizing that active transportation piece, maybe the policy framework that this committee has to have a conversation about is that conversation about what the bucket conversation, how many dollars or funds do we put in different types of projects. So maybe that's really where that conversation should happen. And that frankly, maybe it's because we do compare like projects to each other, this maybe is more of a second phase conversation of giving extra points or awarding points to bicycle and pedestrian projects. One of the other ones that we heard very consistently that the TIP ought to be thinking about is addressing sort of those fundamental last mile connection issues. And one of the reasons why we didn't really carry forward that tonight is that we've already done some things that we think are really related to that. Last month, NVIC approved a series of set-asides in the TIP some of which actually begin to fund last mile eligible projects that were not previously eligible previously. And the other thing that has happened is that obviously we have emphasized through the TIP projects that support urban centers. And given the need of those places in terms of last mile connections, there's an assumption that many of the projects in urban centers are ultimately going to be addressing last mile issues. So quickly then back to kind of what's in front of you today. We're really recommending allocating 4 points to one new criterion and then one revised criterion that this group has already seen. Obviously, I think the memo provides some detail, but a very quick, high-level summary. We decided to peel off 1 point and recommend that go back into the urban growth boundary area that we've already talked about previously. The previous recommendation was that should be 3 points overall. We are recommending that get bumped up to 4 as the maximum point possibility under that category. And that really is because MetroVision 2035 and frankly all MetroVisions that came before it make it very clear that as a region we should be prioritizing investments in infrastructure and growth and development within areas within the UGB. So to me it just felt appropriate that maybe we should continue that and maybe just add a point there. And then that second recommendation is the item that's new that really reflects both conversations that this group has had as well as conversations that we've had around the region when it comes to particularly thinking on the housing and economic development issues that we've been talking quite a bit about over the past few months. When we talked with NVIC now several months ago, but it went over a few months, about urban centers as a key area that we wanted to prioritize in the TIP process, there really was a rich discussion that yes, this group recommended that urban centers are critical, but there are also other employment centers that really are very critical to the overall economic prosperity of this region. We ought to be thinking about making infrastructure investments in those areas as well. As I mentioned, when it really comes to the idea of talking about housing and economic development issues, which are new topics that we're considering as part of MetroVision 2040, we did hear very loudly a consistent message from both the public and stakeholders of the importance of connecting employees to employment locations, particularly lower income workers. And the other thing that we're trying to accomplish with the recommendation that's before you tonight is really the idea of emerging employment centers. Those areas that have really experienced a lot of employment growth over the last 5, 6, 7 years, where frankly maybe the infrastructure has not kept up. We have areas in the region that had 1 employee in 2007-8 now have over 2,000 employees within that geographic area. And so let's think about making sure that our infrastructure is keeping up with the growth of employment in those areas and making sure that there's access to those areas. So I do have, everyone should have a series of maps that explains all of these things, and I'll walk you through those, and hopefully it's helpful. They should all be hopefully stapled, and I'll just sort of do them, frankly, in reverse order. So this is your 1 point recommendation, and these are for areas, and I can get into the methodology of how we got there if you'd like to do that. I tried to do in the memo, but this is one of those things that's kind of hard to write about, so maybe if people have questions, we can just do it that way. And so these are areas that really experienced between 1.5 and 2 times the growth rate in employment as comparable TAZs, or transportation analysis zones, around the region. The revised memo makes a mention of a number much larger than the 14 or 15 transportation analysis zones that you're seeing here. That's because there's a pretty hefty majority that actually would be eligible under the 2-point criteria. So it's pretty simple. If you have a project that is in this transportation analysis zone, it would receive 1 point just because it is an area that has experienced tremendous employment growth over the last 7, 8 years. So that is sort of the 1 point, the first entry level. The second one are transportation analysis zones that experience more than twice the rate of employment growth than other TAZs around the region. And so then you're looking at probably 85 or so TAZs that ultimately come in to this category, many of which are obviously pretty spread around the region. And I'll just go on to the next one because obviously we can spend some time talking about that. This one is probably the more complicated one because there's a few things going on. This is bringing together not only strong employment growth over the last 7-8 years, but also that notion of connecting that employment growth to areas particularly of low-income areas. And so what you have on the map are ultimately three things. The sort of the lightest blue here, the sort of overlay that's kind of shaded in, that is the current version of our environmental justice areas. We are going to continue to adjust this based on some new data that's coming in over the next month or so. I suspect it will look pretty similar to what's in front of you, but I cannot guarantee you that when it comes time to project evaluation, it will be literally the exact same boundary. The yellow areas are, again, transportation analysis zones that experience growth at a rate that exceeded the rate of the region. And then the green areas are areas where they are both an environmental justice area as well as an area that experienced growth that exceeded that of the region over that period. So one of the things that came up that I know there's been some conversations about is this idea of how do you know if a project is connecting these two areas, right? And we, under the sort of going from the guidance that we've had all along to keep this as simple as possible, we have tried to keep our understanding of what that might mean as simple as possible. So I'll just come down here and try to give you an example real quick that's kind of in the sort of Parker Road area. Green basically means it's both an environmental justice area and it's also had tremendous employment growth, right? If that project location appears within that green area, that's 3 points. There's really no thinking about it. If the project touches that area, it is considered to have connected an environmental justice area to an area that's experiencing tremendous growth. The connecting piece is, you think about that as this area here, right? If you had a project that was connecting this area, this environmental justice area that may be an area that's minority area and or a low income area, if it's connecting to this area that is experiencing tremendous employment growth, it would be eligible for 3 points. So very literally, what is the project termini? What is it connecting from and to? Really decides whether it's connecting those two things and whether it's eligible for those 3 points.
You ready?
Yeah, sure.
Ready for questions, Sue?
Sorry,
I'm sorry, Nancy.
I apologize.
I see you raise their hand.
I'm struggling a little bit here because when we pull out, there's so much of this shaded area. How do you develop a criteria that says what connects what? Because there's a huge environmental justice area that you've identified. I'm just not sure how you develop the criteria so that anything just doesn't qualify, connecting, a whole bunch of roads. How do you narrow that down?
Sure. So I'll try it again, and maybe this will help. So, I get that the environmental justice area looks pretty large on the map, but I'll sort of hover over here a little bit, so you can see this is sort of shaded that light blue, right? This is an environmental justice area. This area over here is an area that experienced tremendous employment growth over the last 7 or 8 years, right? So the way that we establish that connection is literally, let's just say it's a roadway because I think that's the simplest way to think about it. If someone is proposing a roadway that connects this area over to this area of employment growth, that's considered to be connected, right?
I guess I'm wondering, how far? I mean, do you go 10 miles, 2 miles, 20 miles?
It's whether it touches. It literally is the envelope of that project. Where does it begin? Where does it end? Does it begin in an area that's an environmental justice area and end in a high employment growth area? If so, then it's eligible for those 3
So
points.
you could go miles away.
Potentially.
If a road improvement took you to a yellow area, you could go from the big yellow area on the right all the way over to something kind of on the left.
Yes.
Up there of the metro area.
Yes.
I'm not sure how that's really, how we manage that, but
Jack?
I understand it. So let's just take the big yellow area. In reality, if you have a road project that starts anywhere in the yellow 100 yards inside of the yellow
Yep.
and touches the light blue, you get the point.
That's correct.
There you go.
We are bringing forward this, what I consider the simplest recommendation. If this group feels like that needs to be nuanced, then obviously we can have that conversation.
Suzanne?
So do you have to go from the nearest yellow to the nearest blue, or you can go from the yellow way at the top to the blue way at the bottom?
Absolutely.
Okay, that seems like we're talking about spaghetti here then.
Okay, Jack, and then Jackie?
But it really doesn't matter, because the question is, along the way, the minute you hit the blue from the yellow, you get it. If you hit from the blue to the yellow or from the yellow to the blue, you get it. So it's just quite an interesting way to look at it. As long as it touches it, is what they're saying, is the recommendation. So.
Jackie?
And I guess I have a more fundamental question is, why are we using 2005 to 2013? I mean, is it just the tip cycle, and what's the basis of that? And really, is that the best period of time to be looking at I mean, I just feel like we've got a lot of things thrown in here. Is that the best period of time to be determining the employment growth over? Does that make the most sense for us to do moving forward over the next 4 years? And also, you know, I have a question about the environmental justice areas as well. And I had asked Jennifer, and she had sent me some information that said it had to be a per capita income of less than $15,000 and a non-white population of greater than 33%. So both of those conditions are.
It's an or.
It is an or. Okay, and then I'm really not trying to create problems for anybody, but it's just a fundamental question for me. So does student housing then, people in student housing who are living in dorms, for example, they're pretty much all of them are earning less than that. And then, to me, that's a completely different environmental justice than associated with people who are really in poverty. And not that, hey, listen, I was a poor student too, so I'm not suggesting that they're not. But I am suggesting that it's, to me, to awarding the same amount of points to, you know, people supporting families and trying to get jobs and working versus people that are potentially getting help from parents and other things in dorms. So do you distinguish amongst that, or is it, how can you address that concern? And then also I'd like to understand the why you picked that time frame. And
yes, so you asked two questions, and I'll handle the first one, and maybe Steve, do you want to kind of just give an environmental justice overview that might be helpful? In terms of the 2005 to 2013, why we picked that, there was a primary reason is that a lot of our goals at MetroVision 2035 are benchmarked to 2005. For instance, we have a goal of accommodating 75% of employment in urban centers between 2005 and 2035. So we have purchased data over time to benchmark back to that 2005. So we looked back largely because, you know, to me it shows a demand for infrastructure that's real. You can say that there is a job there that was not there the year before. We could have looked at some of our forecasted job growth, but we've been very clear, particularly when talking with your staffs, that we are not going to use our small area forecast in the TIP process, right? So we did not feel that we could have said that and then come back and actually looked forward. We thought it was best to look back. And so really the 05 to 13 is a matter of data availability, and because we ultimately are benchmarking back to 2005 quite a bit.
And I guess I do struggle a little bit with that because I am speaking parochially now. We've added a considerable amount of jobs in Lone Tree in 2014 with Kaiser coming in and the Schwab facility, so we will get no credit for that for the next 4 years of TIP, and that just does not seem fair to me. It just doesn't, and I don't know if other communities are experiencing similar things, but missing it by 1 year, it just seems like we're not, I understand why staff might want it, it makes more sense, but it doesn't pass the smell test to me. But, and then what about the environmental justice then? Could you explain that to me?
Yeah, for that one, I will have to double check, but I'm 90% sure that the census data that we use includes the dorms, or as it's known in the census, group quarters, or up here where my son lives, who is low income and is actually taking my income to pay for college. I'm 90% sure that that's included. I can double check, so whether that's right or wrong, good or bad, I believe it is included into, that's why like School of Mines area you also see.
Right. I mean, it looked like they were surrounding dorms, and maybe it's just me, but I fundamentally, I don't have a problem with them getting some points, but to get the same amount of points, I think we should be prioritizing the areas that are struggling families that are not students. To me, I distinguish between a family that's really struggling in a poverty situation and students who are in school, and that's just part of the, unfortunately, and I'm glad you're supporting your son, but that's kind of, in my that's your responsibility and your child's responsibility. So not that they shouldn't get something, but should they get the same amount as the others? I don't think that makes sense to me.
And I'll check with the census data to see if it's easy to extract out or not. That's another factor. If we can extract it out, then it's probably an option on the table. If it's really embedded in the census data, I'm not sure if it'll be easy to extract out. I'll have to look at that. Robin
and then Val.
Couple thoughts. Apologies for being late today, but did take a good look at this before I came in, and I'm glad to hear the debate. First, I mean, I hear the questions about the distance that people might travel, but we're talking about between 1 and 3 points in a more than 100-point system. So it's a lot of cost to build a 12-mile facility to connect a blue area to a yellow area for 1 to 3 points. So it's one of those things that's legally possible, but implausible in terms of the return you'd get in points for the cost of the facility, of which you have to do the match. So I just don't see that as a likely outcome of these points. To the student housing, I mean, I can speak to Denver. We only have a couple areas. Many of our colleges are commuter colleges. We have a couple dorms, one of whom I can see on the map is not in blue. And, you know, the other one is, but it's surrounded by families in poverty. And so I actually don't think that a dorm is enough to meet, you know, the constant, I mean, unless it's a census tract of all dorms, it just doesn't seem to me, it's kind of like the old debate about counting the jail population when you do your population for funding formulas. And the way the state has always gone, the way the feds have always gone is if they're in your community, they count. And so, you know, in Denver, we know that almost the vast majority of our poverty is children. And so I'm just, I just, there's no data that I know of that would indicate that that number of students is enough to create significant amounts of blue where there wouldn't be. But I appreciate the question. And overall, I really feel excited about these points. I feel like they are very responsive. I mean, it's always been a little bit uncomfortable that we're doing the tip scoring before we finish the regional plan that we're supposed to be aiming towards. But having done some of the listening sessions that you've done and knowing where the feds are really rewarding communities with money, these are things that, you know, really, I mean, DRCOG region got, you know, $4 million and change to be thinking about these questions, some of which is going to catalytic projects on all of the lines. So I really am excited about this new proposal, and I'm ready to move it, not to shut out and debate, but I think it's a really strong proposal, so I'm going to move it.
Val?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. and I
don't have a second, though.
Oh, was that? I'm sorry. That was
no. That was the motion. I said move, but let me say it motion. Motion to adopt the staff recommendation for agenda item 4.
We have a second. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to speak against the motion. Basically, what's happening in here is that we have been supplied with these maps at the beginning of the meeting. We have not reviewed it. I have not had a chance to review this with my staff at all whatsoever. Every item that goes through here, as you all know, the staff, I mean, they're the technicals. They're the ones that gives us the advice. We don't know everything. And I think it's our policy that we have these items 24 hours at least before the meeting, before taking action. So I was actually going to move that we table this till the next meeting because it does not give us any chance for us to review it with our staff itself. So I feel very, very uncomfortable. I enjoy the conversation. I think that's beneficial to us to go ahead and be able to make the decision. But when we are provided with the maps right at the beginning of the meeting, that doesn't fly with me.
We have Jack. I would want to insert myself in the queue, and then I think Robin.
We had a motion to table that item. Is that correct? No. he just made a motion.
Did you?
Okay, second.
All right.
The question I have is, which I'm truly struggling with and trying to understand, is the job growth area, which is the yellow. What I'm struggling with is we got these areas that are so huge. Now, how do you determine, and I'm trying to figure out, how do you, is there some criteria we look at section by section? I'm trying to figure out, like, does open space that's connecting two areas that might have it count? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out that there's 250, there's this 2 times the growth area in all of that surrounding boundaries in the yellow. Because when I look down below, the second highest job growth area in the nation has got pockets of growth, but I don't see where the growth is. And that's what I'm confused about, is that I'm looking at this big, huge pockets, and I'm saying, wait a minute, that's got to be smaller pockets that equal that. I can't believe, I'm having a difficult time understanding how that whole huge yellow area is 202 times the job growth in the whole area. So help me understand how that's calculated, that's all.
So the underlying geography used to make the yellow are transportation analysis zones. So as a region, we have 2,800 some odd geographies akin to like a census tract, but ultimately oriented towards transportation. And so that's why you're going to see pockets that show up where maybe one pocket is more job oriented, but you might see a high growth area that maybe the other transportation analysis zone is maybe more residential oriented. So it really are the really intense job centers that have materialized over the last 8 years or so.
And then I just want to make sure I understand, well, see, and that's what, it just seems odd to me. But the other thing that I find interesting, so I want to make sure I get this right on the EJ issue. So it's poverty or minority?
Yes.
Okay.
We had a point of order over here.
And actually, I didn't want to interrupt.
But you need to vote on the table right
our
now.
distinguished chair, but there is a motion to table, and it was seconded
correct.
by the speaker, and it's not a debatable motion.
We're not debating the motion.
It's a
That was
motion.
clarification on a previous topic.
Right. I take it was a question, perhaps, that was
But
framing
that's a
itself
very good
toward
point.
the motion. But I think we need a vote on the motion at table.
All right.
May I ask a question, though? That doesn't stop discussion. We're just voting on the motion to table, but we could, even if we tabled it, we could still have discussion on, okay, good.
Was this also a point of clarification before the
It is a
vote?
point of clarification, which is whether or not it would be in order to suggest a substitute motion to the mover, which was to move this on to TAC for some analysis among the staff. With the it would be signaling we want it to keep moving, but that we want the technical staff to spend some time with it since they, do numbers. So may I ask the mover if he would be interested in a substitute motion?
I have no problem with that. I just don't want to take action on it now. I think we need the staff to go through there. So let me then, should I then withdraw my table motion?
Why don't you withdraw your...
I'll withdraw my table motion.
Okay. I do, which is an informal process, but you can get away with it. Yes, let's do it. And that would probably be the better way to go.
So then our new motion...
The new motion is to send it to TAC.
And it's seconded.
Yeah, and we'll continue the discussion, that's fine, but I want some analysis from them.
Do we have to vote on this immediately? Is sending to TAC the same priority? as
Debatable
table?
motion.
Okay. All right, so let's continue discussing that and discussing this issue, and then we can vote later on whether or not to send it to TAC or take some other.
I withdraw my motion to...
No, you...
Okay. This is fast and furious. Who knew it was going to be so exciting? Okay, so I think I was in the queue to talk, and was somebody else, Suzanne, after? All right, well, so I guess I had a couple of questions about trying to understand how this might work, and maybe these are questions for TAC, is what kind of projects are we trying to incentivize through this? In my mind, I can see where bus rapid transit might make sense. I'm a little less clear on whether or not we want to be creating highway projects to what seem to be some fairly far-flung areas. Does that fit in with the rest of the Metro Vision goals? The other thing that troubles me is there is no requirement that you actually serve the EJ population in any way. And the history of how this has worked is that we've built interstates through low-income neighborhoods that didn't benefit, but actually harmed those neighborhoods. But under this criteria, you'd still get points for that, right? So we don't actually have to get the low-income people to the jobs in the job center. We're just locating termini. And so maybe the project's helpful, maybe it's not, but that's not a part of this analysis. And I guess I just wanted us to be mindful of that, take a look at that, and make sure that that we're incentivizing the right thing. So I want to throw that into the fodder of things to think about if we send this to TAC, for TAC to think about. And I don't know if staff have any comments or responses on any of that. It's all right if you don't. I just didn't want to.
I think one is
Okay.
worthy. One is worthy, just only because I have the answer to that right away. They're all worthy, but there's only one there's only one where a response comes right to me is in the regular environmental justice criteria, which applies to every single project. So remember, there's another environmental justice set of points, and of course I can't find them right at the moment. Where were those?
Benefit.
Oh, here we go, 0 to 3. 0 to 3 points. And in that one, we do say, there's a line in there that says the sponsor must identify benefits and disadvantages the project may have on the environmental justice community. So potentially that exact same statement could be added.
But that's my point. The project sponsor can say, I've looked at it, and this is going to disadvantage that population. I still get my 3 points. We don't require it to benefit.
Judges. You're
Well,
the
but
judges.
why not have criteria that actually give points to things that we want? I mean, I assume the point of locating a project in an EJ area is to benefit that community, right? So why don't we require benefit? That's another point I was going to bring up in the criteria, that all we do is identify impacts. It could be good or bad, but they don't require a benefit. Anyway, thank you. Suzanne was in the queue. Jack, am I seeing your hand as well?
Yeah.
Okay, so Suzanne? And
Well,
Phil, then Phil.
Okay. Well, you asked part of my question. I guess the other thing I wanted to clarify about how the yellow was defined is the rate of growth is above average, but does it get at the absolute number of jobs? So some of these far-flung areas, like, are there a ton of jobs up there, or is it just growing, a small number of jobs is growing at a faster rate?
We set a cap that there had to be at least 250 a growth of 250 jobs between 2005 and 2013. So anything that did not meet that came off the top. So if you went from 0 to 249, you would not be shown in yellow here. If you went from 1 to 251, you actually would be.
Right. Okay.
So it doesn't have anything that would be like from 1 job to 9 jobs. That would not be shown here.
Okay, even though that would be a huge increase. Okay, I guess I was going to ask some of the questions Elise asked, which is just to make sure we're incentivizing a transportation system that we want. Getting all those people into their cars to drive far away doesn't necessarily make sense. But I guess the other thing is, don't we want to be incentivizing the jobs near where the people are, as opposed to incentivizing roadways to get people far away? I mean, just over the long term. I guess that's another question is, again, we want to incentivize, I think, jobs and growth inside the urban growth boundaries, not sending people out of their neighborhoods to the farther ends of our focus area. Anyhow, I just think that should be part of the discussion.
And that sort of gets back to the comment that came up earlier about if you're thinking about trying to get these 3 points, are you actually going to take what in your mind was a mile and a half project and make it 12 miles just for these points? It's not worth it. You really would be looking at those connections that are between environmental justice areas and high job growth areas that are frankly adjacent to each other. That's the simplest way to get to thinking through these points and to try to create a project that ultimately does that.
And I appreciate that. I just think we should give points for the things that we want to make happen.
So we have just the queue as we know it, Jack, then Phil, then Nancy. Is anybody else wanting to speak to this? And then Don.
As to the motion to table, I mean not table, excuse me, but to send it to the TAC, I actually support that motion. I just want to put that there. But continue our conversation along these other lines. On the EJ issues and talking about, one thing to keep in mind, when you have to do your NEPA and EIS, you have to show benefit there, and you have to. Otherwise, you're not going to get federal approval, depending on some projects. Not all projects have that requirement. I get that. So I understand the benefit. Now the next question becomes, okay, so how you measure benefit, and what is benefit? I mean, when we did the I-85 flyover, and we had an EJ component right next door to it because there's a large trailer park right there. Quite frankly, the question became, how was that a benefit, and how could we show benefit? Well, that's the whole conundrum of issues that you have to try to display. And so separate and deliberate access points were provided and a lot of other mitigating circumstances. It's a real tough one when you start battling that particular issue on the EJ benefit, because it's easy for us to say, well, okay, let's give eco passes to everybody. Well, I hear you, but that's not really what that community needs or what we have to address. So each one literally stands on their own, and that's what happens as we do that. So I think there is a deliberation of some benefit. I get it, but I just want to be cautious when we measure benefit. What is it? Jobs, I'll just be honest, I'm just really concerned about when you have a job growth over such a long period of time of 250 jobs. I get that, but when you got a job growth of 12,000 jobs in a confined area and it's measured the same, let's ask ourselves a simple question, ladies and gentlemen: which one's got the greater impact on traffic and air quality? I mean, there you go. So we got to figure out a way somehow, and this is why I'm really looking forward to just going back to the TAC and let them wrestle with that one and come back with a recommendation, because that is the conundrum and the thing that I'm trying to bring up when I say I get this huge area, 250 jobs, or let's say 300 jobs were grown in that area. I get it over a long period of time, but then I go back over here and I know that one quarter on the bottom had 12,000 jobs. And so it's like Shazam, but it's both the same color yellow. So we're going to have to deal with that issue also, I believe. So thank you.
So we have Phil, then Nancy, then Don, then Robin.
Okay, and I'm on the page, Brad. And this is more of an issue for TAC to consider in this, which is the criteria that's listed, particularly for the second bullet point of promoting access to existing and emerging employment centers, and then staff recommendations up to 3 points awarded for projects that promote access to existing and emerging employment centers, and see below. Question is how do you get that balance with existing and what is there? Also, as I look at some of these places where the yellow is, it's at places where transit could be extended to, and how to consider transit in some of these where that's where the job is, but that's not yet where transit is extended to. So those would be some items that I'd like to hear TAC comment on, or say, you know, how does this actually fit with our goals and objectives to make sure we're making those connections. Thank you.
Nancy?
Yeah, I think what Jack said is really important, to me is kind of defining what the potential of an area, not just what the growth has been in the last year, but what the potential is, and then how often is that going to be reevaluated, because things change, and so I think that, you know, I just think there needs to be some parameters around that. I guess I'm just still, this whole thing and how it's going to work. When we talk about transit, I mean, we had a heck of a time trying to get the transit we got today. And honestly, if anybody recalls, Fast Tracks was going out well beyond 2040, and we're lucky to be where we are today with most of it being built out. So I think I'd like to make sure that realism is involved in this as well, and that it is, you know, if we're saying only transit, I mean, I can tell you we had huge employment in the south part of town, and we have almost zero bus service. So, you know, some of that's not going to be within our control, but we can say we'd like it, but I don't know that it's going to happen. And we've got a long way to go to even pay back on Fast Tracks and things like that to make sure that that system is is completed, even in the 2040 timeframe. So I think going back to the TAC, I would just stress to be realistic here, and if it means adding a road connection to one of these areas that makes it more accessible, I think, you know, that has to be a high priority and not just putting all of our eggs in a bus or transit. Because I'm very concerned about the ability for that to happen in the next 20-some-odd years. Thanks.
Great. Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I was just looking at the map that Jack was doodling on. And there's a lot of discussion here, and I just want to bring up and ask, are we looking at transportation? We look at multimodal. We're looking at how to help people get to where jobs are. Or are we going to play economic development individuals here? And yes, we have economic development. We have DRCOG, EDC, and there's a lot of economic development groups out there. However, when I look at this, and it was discussion, I believe Suzanne brought it up, as far as you should get more credit if you have yellow next to blue. And we are giving credit for areas that have high growth rates for jobs. But if we're playing economic development individuals here, actually that skews. Because if you're looking at areas that have high growth rates already, and that's what you're looking at, by providing more dollars, more infrastructure for those high growth areas, if you have a blue area away from that high growth, job growth area, it actually is pulling away from that area as far as future growth for jobs. So economic development wise, I see where you're getting at. Economic development wise, you would do just the opposite of what's being proposed. Also, Nancy, I agree. If you look at talking about bus service, south part of Jefferson County, the day the W line opened up, they terminated all of our bus service.
That's what happened to us.
So all of a sudden, we went from having bus service for disabled, for our aging population, and those to get around to their businesses. And then they just said, well, you have the W line, that is your service, and they took it away. So even if you wanted to take the W line into downtown and you live in the south part of Jefferson County, you can't even get to the W line if you rely on the bus. So once again, what's here right now may not be here tomorrow based upon our bus service. Thank you.
So we have Doug, and then I'm going to be looking to wrap up so that we can. Robin, and then Doug. Sorry.
Thanks. Quick question. I'm not sure where folks are reading transit. I see transportation. Is this proposal at all limited to transit?
No, this would apply to any project that's making a connection between either an EJ area to a high growth employment area, or just the 1 point is just within high growth employment areas. So it does not matter the mode of transportation.
I think we don't need to be having that debate because this doesn't limit it. So, okay. The second, just two observations. One, we are in many ways on this board and this committee getting things that we asked for. So yellow is very simple. And I'm sure that you had a discussion about gradation, right? Where you have the number of jobs and maybe it's 3 points for the most and 2 points for the middle and 1 point for the least. So we sometimes have to be careful. We can get much more perfect about where there's 12,000 jobs versus where there's 500 jobs if that's what we want, but we then can't yell at the staff for making it more complicated. So I'm fairly agnostic. I feel like if we want to get more perfection, that's fine, but we just need to be able to signal to the staff we're okay with that. And then when we can say to TAC is, do some gradation here. And then the other observation I would make is, I love Don's observations and the ones about transit, but in some ways we have a solution to that, which was urban centers, which is where jobs are, but the transportation already is. In some ways, I believe we got this proposal with these job centers because we as a board have said, oh, but there are job centers that aren't in urban centers. We would not be looking at this map, I don't think, if we hadn't asked for it. So just a little observation about, just the history of how, I think sometimes these things are in response to us. So if we don't want it anymore, it's not good anymore, that's okay. But I believe this was in direct response to us saying we don't just want to talk about jobs that are in urban centers. So therefore we then are in more far-flung areas. Therefore we are, and so I think that when TAC debates it, maybe they can talk a little bit about that gradation factor and whether they're willing to tolerate complexity to get to perfection or closer to it.
Okay, so Doug, Jackie, Nancy, and then maybe we can move to a vote?
Maybe. Just saying.
We already voted, didn't we?
Well, and trying to speak to the motion, which is to refer the matter to TAC, and I think the discussion is helpful in informing TAC on the kinds of issues that they can do. And with that in mind, a question to staff. Looking at the maps that you have provided us, you say that you used 2005 to 2013, and I certainly understand that you can't at this point today project into the future and say, well, what will it look like in 2014? We know we have various things planned, but will they actually happen? But is it staff's intention that this is a static map now that you've compiled these data and you say we have 2005 to 2013? You would anticipate that we would continue to use this same map, or is it the intention of staff to be responsive to the questions raised by Jackie and by Jack and by Nancy, that you would provide iterations of this map going forward so that each year you could update it to see whether there were new data that in fact changed and added yellow or took away yellow?
I mean, that's one of the reasons why we used 05 to 13 is because of the relationship, particularly to the urban centers goal. We want to monitor that progress over time. Now, whether this would be updated in time for the actual call for projects, we tend to use the same quarter. I'm pretty sure we use quarter 2 of 2005 and 2013. So we would not have 2014 second quarter data in time to clean it and to prepare it and to update this map for the actual project evaluation piece. We would update it potentially over time, but would it would impact the actual project evaluation that's going to happen later this summer? Most likely not.
All right, so I understand that in terms of this particular cycle that we face now, you don't have that capacity, but I take it that, and that's something that TAC has to address, whether that impacts this analysis or not. But thinking longer range on this project and how we look at it in the future, I take it that we essentially have data that we feed into the computer. We take those data and we filter it, and you could run it on a daily basis if you wanted to, based upon when those data arrive. Is that a fairly accurate statement?
Yeah, so our intent, so we have 2005 data quarter 2, we have 2013 quarter 2. When 2014 quarter 2 is available, we will purchase that, and we will continue to do that to understand, really, frankly, where jobs are occurring in this region. I mean, just for our own personal information, and obviously information that we can share with you as well.
And I think it's important to be able to share that with staff, because it does at first glance appear, and I apologize for going on too long, but I just wanted to ratify the point that Jackie was making. It appears at first glance that, in effect, the map is ignoring that which we know or have high confidence, but in some cases know is going to happen. And what you're saying is, well, as soon as we get that information, we will plug that information in and we update the map. It's just a question of, does it hit in time for a particular application and a particular cycle?
Correct.
And that's the question. All right. Secondly, to go back to a point that Elise made earlier relative to projects, as I understand, I apologize, let me go back to my first point for a second. That addresses the issue. We talk about emerging employment centers in here. It's not just existing, it's emerging employment centers. And with the use of the word emerging, I guess I do come back to the point also that, well, we don't actually have the Charles Schwab jobs but we know we're contracted to have the Charles Schwab jobs. Is there some factor that needs to be put into this analysis so that we can say that's an emerging employment center? Otherwise, you don't need the word emerging. I think you would just say existing employment centers, because it's based upon what you've seen from the data that you have. So again, just trying to inform the conversation of TAC, not to make decisions now, but to say those are issues that I believe should be credibly addressed. Then the last point, and I apologize again for length, the notion, as I understand it, is it's not just a question of a project that starts in the yellow and goes through the blue and then goes on out here somewhere to the west. It's supposed to be something that connects A and B, and one end of it is supposed to be in the employment center, and one end of it is supposed to be in the just the EJ area. Correct. Is that the idea?
Yes.
All right. And again, if that can be articulated more clearly by TAC, that might be beneficial for our analysis. Thank you.
Okay, Jackie and then Nancy.
And I guess I just want to say I think this discussion has been very good, and I appreciate the staff's work, but I also appreciate all the questions that were asked, and I actually think we can get to a better place having had this discussion, and I hope staff isn't taking this as being yelled at, because that is not the context with which my comments were made. It was in the sense of I want to understand it, and these are the questions that I have, and as it goes back to TAC, these are the things I'd like you to be considering with TAC. And I actually think that we can, you know, I want my cake and eat it too, and I think in this case we might be able to, because I do think you can do a better job at defining, I think, a gross job growth, particularly 250 jobs over an 8-year period does not seem significant to me when Kaiser came in and we have 500 jobs like that in a 2-year period. So I think I would appreciate TAC looking at coming up with a best of both scenario where if you've added a significant amount of jobs, some flat amount of jobs should be substantive, even if it's not going to be changing changing the growth rate of your area. I mean, Douglas County has been benefited from tremendous job growth, so they shouldn't be penalized if they're bringing in 500 jobs, but it doesn't bump it up enough to make it 2 times what it was. And just a clarifying question, these yellow areas, all that means is that employment growth has been above average, but if you look at the 1.5 to 2 times the average, the orange, it doesn't even reach the 1.5 times. Is that my understanding? It's been above average, but it hasn't met the 1.5 threshold.
Correct.
And which is why they're so, I guess, why they're so small, and why this one yellow area is so large.
There will be more yellow,
Right.
a little less
Right.
red, and a little less, mostly because this is a sort of this is a measure that's just between 1.5 and 2. So the orange is going to be the least because
Yes.
it's just kind of a narrow place.
And I just want to make
Yeah.
that point clear to maybe other members of the board. But anyway, that's my intention in making these comments. It's to drive the discussion at TAC.
Okay, Nancy, and then maybe closing remarks by Sue.
I just wanted to say, I do think that every point does matter, and even though it's 1 out of 100, it sets a direction, and it gives is a focus. So I think the debate is really good. I think sending it back to TAC to resolve some of these questions, because I think if we're not clear on how this is going to how this is going to incentivize or not, and is it going to really achieve the outcome that we want, then it needs to be clarified. And I think TAC can help with that, with all the questions, but I do really believe that every point matters when we're trying to move in a certain direction or not. So,
Sue.
So actually, I only wanted to comment on the 250 jobs, which I'm hoping desperately you won't reduce, because there are a number of towns for whom that's pretty critical. That's a huge increase for us. We're actually on here in yellow. So that was my one comment. I guess my other one is, and I'll be voting against the motion because I'd love to see us make a decision without sending everything back to TAC for clarification.
Okay. Mayor Tisdale. Oh, I thought you said you had one. Yes, by all means, let us vote. So the motion on the table is to send this back to TAC with all of the conversation and questions and comments that we just made given to them as part of their discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion passes. Item number 5 then?
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a visual guy, so I'd like to start off with this flow chart that I know is all dear to your hearts by now. We've talked about it a number of times, just to give you some indication of where we are in the process. You know, last month we had a discussion about the set-asides, and we established what those would be. And now the next step in our process is to have this discussion about what the TIP criteria, the project criteria would be for the selection of Phase 1 projects. The stuff that Brad just talked about is part of the MetroVision criteria, which is part of this Phase 1 selection criteria. We will talk about the other 75 points that are involved in that Phase 1 criteria right now. And as you know, you guys were provided this last Tuesday. I'm looking for it. Here it is right here, and we'll pull this up here in a second. And really just, you know, staff's purpose in the changes that we made here is really maybe threefold. First was to reflect the policy directive that you all have given us with regards to the changes that you would like to see, and I hope we accurately reflected those. Second was to streamline the existing criteria and hopefully make it more understandable and easier for staff when they do indeed fill this out. There were, you know, we struck out an awful lot in here, as you probably noticed. A lot of it was more descriptive in nature, maybe even confused topics because of how verbose it was. So we tried to streamline that as much as we can. Well, I think I probably said 2 and 3 in the same. I mean, we did want to try to make it as plain English as possible so that it would make more sense than what it previously had done. You know, this is our first shot at this, at our recommendations. It's not perfect by any means. You know, I've already talked to several members as well as staff members, and there are some you know, legitimate comments, and I'm sure you'll have more today to help in improving this document. But I believe it's enough information here today to stimulate discussion. And with that, I'm not planning on going through the criteria one by one, just to be respectful of your time. But we're here to answer any questions or listen to any improvements you may have to this criteria. So myself and Steve, of course, he's our local historian here. He knows more about the history of the TIP than anybody. We'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, maybe we can take some general comments and questions and then maybe move through this if people have specific comments on different pieces. Does that work for folks? Robin, you had your hand up first, and then I think Bob.
Yeah, I don't have a general comment. I have a few changes that Denver wanted to propose. So it's in the roadway capacity section, so it's
Okay.
the first table. But when that's appropriate, I'm ready.
Okay. Any general comments or questions before we just start moving through the document? Bob?
General comment that I would have is I think that with the volume of changes here, I don't think that, well, let me start over. I hate to copycat the previous agenda item, but with the sheer volume of changes here, I know that TAC has not had an opportunity to have technical comments on this, and so I would recommend that this also go back to TAC, not for policy discussion, but for technical comments. I know that a couple of them have started to look at some of the items to make some technical comments, but I think that it's important that it be vetted through TAC completely and then come back to MVIC. So I would make the motion that this also go back to TAC.
Second.
Okay. So we can discuss that motion. I guess one question would be, and I think Robin, I know Boulder County has some suggested improvements. Maybe it would still be appropriate for us to identify them, even if we send this back to tech. Okay. So I think Sue was up next, and then Doug, and then Jack. These are general comments, and then if you have specific changes, we'll catch them as we go through.
So just to comment on the going back to TAC, I think what we ought to do at some point in time is clarify what our process is. Because we have in the past said there's no sense sending something to TAC that we don't even support. So it comes through us first, then it goes to TAC for technical comments, and they might propose some changes from what we support because they've got a lot more technical expertise than we have. If we are going to say, no, we don't want to actually even weigh in until TAC has taken a look at it, we can certainly do that. It does mean we may send something to them that we aren't going to approve in the long run. But that's probably a discussion for a different time. I just think we're reversing the process, and we need to figure out what we want to do and then be somewhat consistent on that, because that would save us, both us and TAC, a lot of time.
Fair point. Doug?
And I think that the process that we followed in the last motion is consistent with and respectful of what you've suggested, Sue. I think it is an opportunity now for us to give some general comments and some general discussion and then some specific comments, but I think it is, as I say, an opportunity for us to express, yes, we like this idea, but there's a lot of detail here, because I want to ask staff the question, because we do refer in some of the criteria to person miles of travel, and then in other areas we do talk about the vehicle hours of travel. And I would like to have, and I apologize, and I recognize I'm basically saying give me a 101 level course here, but the distinction that Will Tour brought out, saying I think you should be looking more at vehicle hours traveled rather than person miles of travel. Can you just help me understand the
way around. Yeah, I think
I'm sorry, yeah, there you go, yeah, right. See, you see? You see? I just made my point. So can you walk me through a little bit of that, please?
Well, sure. I am, and we have had discussions with Will. Is Will still here? Oh, okay. About that. And, we don't necessarily disagree. It's just a matter in which, we can actually confidently be able to measure that. And certain components or certain criteria lend itself better to that than others. And that's our big concern. And we're going to work through that. And I think it's a very good topic for TAC to have that discussion about what's appropriate and what's not. And we do think we might have a mechanism, specifically for what Will was talking about, to make that work. But we're not sure. It's about, from our perspective, is about, scoring of the projects when we get them. How easy or how hard is it to do that? And we don't want to be, we would like to be as objective as possible and not have to rely on subjective measures. So that is a great conversation for TAC, and hopefully when we come back to you again, we'll have that answer in much finer detail. Well, it's really the difference between measuring the number of vehicles versus the number of persons transversing a corridor. So vehicles would be, basically, for example, would be traffic counts, whereas, person miles traveled will be based on, for example, the vehicle occupancy of that car. So there might be one car, but it could be 3 people within that vehicle. So being able to arrive at that. So, for example, like transit, for example, is a very difficult one, because a bus obviously is one vehicle, but it could be transporting a number of people. So I think it gets back to that discussion, or that policy discussion about, when we talk about congestion type measures, are we more worried about getting vehicles one place faster than the other, or we're more worried about getting people? It's not necessarily the same thing. It's basically the same thing, but not that.
And with
Yeah,
that
no.
clarity,
Yeah, uh-huh.
shall we start moving through this document? I guess it would be useful to flag, if we have a motion on the table to send this to TAC, we could say, give us your comments on everything, or we could actually ask TAC to focus on certain technical questions. And I think during this discussion as we move through this document, maybe we can clarify that. So Robin, you were going to start.
I would echo, no, that's okay. I would echo the PMT for roadway operational. To me, that specifically is close enough to capacity. But so for capacity, these pages are not numbered, but table 4, the third page, the multimodal connectivity, it actually starts on the second page on the bottom, but then most of it is on the third page. So 2 specific changes that Denver would like the board or TAC to consider. We love that you've added the 8 points for a physically protected bike lane. That is the safest and the best, and these are roadway capacity projects, so they might be higher speed roads, et cetera. But we think it might have been not intentional to take out the 4 points for all of the other kinds of bike facilities that you can build. So a protected lane, just for those of you who don't know, is concrete. It's much more expensive. You have to street sweep it differently. You have to plow it differently. There's a whole other list of bike facilities here that's crossed off. We just believe that we should still have those 4 points for those lesser facilities because they're still a lot more achievable for most communities. So we'd like to restore that 4 points, but not take out the 8. The 8's great. So the second issue.
Robin, before
yes.
you go on, maybe we could just deal with these sequentially.
Yeah.
Any other comments on that? Because I would like to jump in and say Boulder County agrees.
Okay.
Bike shoulders are a huge thing to reduce user conflicts and make it safe, particularly up in our canyons. So we'd like to see points for both as well. Does anybody disagree with that?
Well, staff has no objection to that either. Actually, that was an oversight by us, and I'm glad several people have caught that, and we've been informed. So,
the second item in
Wait,
that.
did you have a?
Sorry, and you may be going to. I don't disagree with that. I think it's a good suggestion. My question really comes into, and it's kind of back to the second bullet there. If you were going to talk about, were you going to go past that, Robin, or?
I was going to talk about the red section next.
Okay, because my question was really if we're taking them, mine was 4 points for adding, so we have fewer points for adding a new travel lane or redesigning an existing purpose travel lane for transit HOV use, which carries more people and that gets 4 points.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the point that I think Will Tour made earlier.
Yeah, I'm not clear on why the bike lanes get 8 and the HOV, which carries, is expensive to build and carries more people, gets 4 points. I'm struggling with how that makes sense. Right. We're taking more people, it costs more, and it gets less points.
Well, I think you make a good point, Nancy, and I would go farther and say I suggest that we make that 8 because point well taken that you get a lot of good done from
and I guess the question is where do the other 4 come from would be the remaining issue. So
well,
I'll just
I don't think it works.
This box is way larger than the total that you can earn. So even though you can only earn a total of 18 points for multimodal, these points add up to way more than that because they're mutually exclusive, right? You're either going to get the 8 points for a protected lane or you're going to get the 8 points for an on-ramp, and you're not going to have both, right? You don't put a protected lane on a bike. So you're maxed at 15. So to me, it doesn't matter what. 18.
So this was an issue for Boulder, and I agree with Nancy that we should increase, and Elise, I guess, and Will.
Okay, so we're just going to keep moving through this, and so if people have opinions on that, flag them. Robin, you're up.
Okay, so the red section, we have 2 different standards, both of which sound a little bit too restrictive. So the first red bullet says 2 points for a new bicycle or pedestrian facility that directly accesses a school. 2 bullets down from that, it says 2 points for a pedestrian facility that directly touches passenger rail station. I get the intent, which is we don't just want someone throwing some sidewalks a few blocks from the transit station and calling it connected, but I think we can get to clearer language that's, I just don't want to get into does that touch, does that not touch. So our suggested language was something like which provides a path to passenger rail, BRT station, or school property, and is within 1/8 of a mile. So you have a clear distance standard, and you have language that's it's a pathway to. So, because I don't want staff to having to second guess either. They need clear standards, but to me, directly accessing, directly touching shouldn't have two different standards, and touching is just a little too narrow, right? I mean, I might have like the sidewalk at the station, but I might be missing the sidewalk between the station and the stoplight to cross the street safely. To me, that would be within the intent of this, but it wouldn't actually hit the letter of it, so.
Okay, Val?
Yes, and I think that the key word in there is a feeder, and it goes back to even the item that we're talking about in the first item itself. Does it just touch? Is it feeding to that center? If it's not, if we need to get a definition for what does a feeder mean, then let's define that, and then we just use that word throughout.
Okay, any other comments on that the bullet points Robin was just on? Jackie?
She reminded me of something I forgot to mention on the other one, so not on this, but
could
we go back up because I have a comment there. Sorry.
Yes.
Did you do that? I'm wondering why we took out the distance requirement for the providing the physically protected facility for bicycle travel on a regional or locally adopted plan for the entire length of the project. I mean, the way that stands, there is no distance requirement for the protected bike lane.
I'm sorry, Jackie, where are we?
So I'm sorry, I went backwards, Doug. I'm the girl that wants her cake and eat it too. So the 8 points for providing a physically protected facility for bike travel, why we took out the distance requirement, why we took out the portion to accommodate a bike facility on a regional or locally adopted plan for the entire length of the project. We took out any kind of a distance requirement. So if you're making this road improvement and providing a physically protected bike path for only a portion of it, you get the 8 points. So I guess I'm just wondering why we don't.
Well, it's a very good question, and I think the intent was that it would be for the entire length of the project. So if we need to add that back in to clarify, then we'll do that.
Good point.
At that bullet point, I have a question that I would like to ask TAC to get to, because I've been to a number of presentations that will actually indicate having physically separate or protected bike elements actually leads to less safety because folks are not being cooperative in the spaces that are there. And I would like to hear a TAC comment relative to that. Less safe.
It's only in New York.
It's
Okay.
Okay.
The study's been done in the state, particularly that's been pulled together, that says when you actually have physically separated spaces and then you have to cross over, what it does is folks are not looking for bicycles in that, and it leads to less awareness that there are other vehicles out there. And typically you're not going to have a total separation under all circumstances.
Okay, so I just want to do a little reality check with us. We have 35 minutes left in this meeting. These are important points, but I don't know, we're not going to be able to go through this document at this level, so we may need to start high grading the take-home points if we're sending this to TAC. Doug?
Just as to underscore the point that Robin made earlier relative to the fact that there are a total of 35 points that are in this particular criterion for multimodal connectivity, and you can only get a total of 18 points, so it's up to 18 points. My question, and it goes back to the issue that I think it was Jackie who said, but you get 8 points for this, and I'm wondering, how do we make the determination as to which points you will award? I mean, let's say you design a project that is intended to get all 35 of these points, but you can only get 18 out of those points. How does staff or we select which ones we're actually calling out and saying, well, okay, even though you qualified for 4 points for this, we're going to give you 2 points because it's the same thing? I mean, how does that work?
Well, I mean,
in brief.
Right. It's really at the local government's discretion which ones they are willing
wanna
to
take credit
fulfill.
for.
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
I need
so
to know my list.
Helpful.
Sorry, go ahead.
are you, Jack, we're just,
This exact one area.
yeah, we're in multimodal, we're
Right.
just at the bottom of the threads.
I just have one question, one item. Do you mind, ma'am?
No.
My point here is that there's something else that's missing. I just want to take this to TAC, and you need to talk about it. For those communities who have invested already heavily in these areas, and those communities who have done it right, and quite frankly have planned it, and have incorporated a lot of these things into their current structure, and have spent the money to do so, you get penalized if you have a new project. You get penalized for, in my opinion, based on the way I read these, because you've already accommodated for these things in good planning and good governance, and now all of a sudden you go to your project and you're not asking for any of these points because you already got it. There's got to be a way to take into consideration that they're already there, or something. I would love the TAC to have that greater discussion, because the point is that that community has invested and spent money to accomplish it, and now you have an adjacent road project, and suddenly you're 18 points down out of the get-go. That's my only question. If you take that to the TAC, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, so, moving on. Sue.
And this actually is at the very beginning, and I know it's a conundrum. I don't expect us to answer it here, but you're only eligible for roadway capacity projects if you have a NEPA disclosure documents signed or expected to be signed, meaning you've spent all the money on NEPA, which has a shelf life. And there are many communities that are not going to be able to spend the money on a NEPA study unless they have pretty good assurance that their project is going to end up in the tips. Because otherwise, they've just thrown money away that they don't have money to throw away. And I understand that we don't want to include a project if it might not be accepted because it fails NEPA. But that's a conundrum. That's a circle. There's no easy answer to that.
Federal requirement. Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about this last month. I was going to say last week. Last month, you know, and it is a project readiness issue to some degree, but the language we have here now is much more liberal than what it was in previous plans. Basically, you know, you can get a project in, and as long as the expectation is that the NEPA documentation is going to be signed sometime within that, well, before 2019, then I think we're good.
Okay, that's not the issue. And neither is funding that you can put in to fund the study. If the ultimate funding to complete the project is not likely to be awarded, doesn't matter whether it's DRCOG or the municipality or the county, somebody spent a whole lot of money for a NEPA study for a project that was dead on arrival. And I don't know that there's an easy solution to that. You don't, nobody's going to guarantee it's going to be funded before you do the NEPA study. It has a shelf life. If it's not going to get in there and get started, you've got to do another NEPA study whenever you get around to it. So that's just, it doesn't matter who funds it. I get that you can put in for the funding, and I get that it doesn't have to be signed. It could be signed somewhere in the year, but the money's still spent with no guarantee your project's going to move forward.
All right, I'm going to move us along. Point noted, and staff may have a response later. I want to take us back to the midpoint there. This is a global comment, but it comes up here. In several points in the document, I'm at the bottom, the midpoint of the page that we're on, where it says 3 or more routes. Frequently,
Right
no,
there.
at least several times, we measure whether or not the number of bus routes that go to a particular destination as opposed to the number of people moved by those. Ultimately, we're caring about moving people and mobility. So if you have 3 not so great routes, they can outcompete a really, really good bus route or 2 really good bus route. And I think that we're using the wrong metric, perhaps for simplicity. And so I would suggest, and throw this out to TAC as well, that the metric be about the number of people, set a threshold for the number of people moved by the buses rather than the number of routes, because that's more important. Does that make sense?
No.
No, I'm not making sense.
No. Okay, so could you get us to is the category transit passenger facility projects, or where are
So
you at?
we're still on the roadway operational improvements projects in the
Okay.
multimodal connectivity box. We haven't gotten out of that one yet.
Right.
It's the last red line in the middle of the page.
Right, got it.
And it says 2 points for a new bicycle or ped facility directly touching ... or existing bus stops serving 3 or more routes. And I'm just suggesting that we shouldn't use metrics around number of routes. We should use metrics around number of people moved by those. This comes up in several points, and I'm just saying let's measure the right stuff. Okay, that's my comment. Robin?
Now I get it.
Any more on the multimodal connectivity?
Oh, I was just going to say, Denver supports that, and actually, we're going on record, because we're most likely to have 3 stops, people, and so if you lower the number of stops, it allows more people to, more jurisdictions might be eligible.
Okay, Nancy and then Val. Just a quick thing. To go all the way back up to the top, I think it should say existing, because let me use C470 as an example, that it already has a bike lane that goes along, I'm not sure how far, but a pretty good
The
distance.
whole length.
The whole length of C470. So I would suggest that that it be existing. I don't think C470 should be penalized, because when a road was built years ago, they had the foresight to put in a bike trail, that whole length that people use, and I don't think a project should be penalized. Okay, that's number one. And the second one is, I'm just not sure where the installing bike counters came from. I look at all these other things on here, and I'm looking at the value of those, and I'm looking at bike counters. I don't get it. I don't understand why that should, when 1 point matters, and I know it's only 30, they're 35, and maybe to only make it 34, but should we really be giving 1 point for bike counters versus some of these other things in here that have, in my opinion, so much more value to getting us where we need to be? Just a comment, and then I'll move on.
Along that line, Nancy, I mean, why don't we just, shouldn't they just be required if we're claiming that this capacity project is going to be enhanced by bikes?
Are you looking?
So just require that they be put in as part of the, if they want to get any of these points. I don't think you should get an extra point for doing it. It should be.
Right.
Okay, Doug, and then we're going to turn the page.
I just want to suggest that because this is a recommendation to TAC to consider the various issues that we're talking about relative to your last point on serving 3 or more routes, I think the possibility is that does serve a purpose rather than counting the number of people, because it shows that there's a diversity of areas that can be covered, and I would like to have TAC weigh in on that to see which is the better metric to use, because I think they might have an opinion, and there could be a technical advice that we could take from them.
It's cake and eat it too again. Some number of passengers, 4 or 3. It's true.
Okay, appreciate that. I'm going to keep pushing us along. Any other comments on Table 5? Suzanne? The point you made, actually, I think it was you, earlier about environmental justice, that not only should they identify the benefits, but, well, anyhow, I still think the project should have benefits, not just that you should show whether it has benefits or disadvantages. I'll just throw that out there for at least, or for TAC to weigh in on. We don't just want to know the impact, we want it to be a positive one, I think. Okay? Sue?
And this is actually just a question. You've taken grade separations out. They were previously eligible. Is that because you think they would be included under the first category, even though they're not mentioned? Okay.
They are eligible. It's just not specifically mentioned. There was no reason to call out, in our minds, there was no reason to call out grade separations and not other projects. It's eligible.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure they were still eligible.
No, yes, they are.
Okay, thanks.
So if I may, can we, I said Table 5, I meant Table 4. We're now ready to go to Table 5. Everybody with me? This roadway operational improvement projects. I had a question. why are we changing the length from 1,800 feet to a mile? It seems at some point operations become new capacity, and so maybe staff could give some explanation as to why that change was made. And Robin, did you have something to add to that as well?
I will just say we support this change because we've actually had 2 projects, one on Quebec and one on Broadway, where we literally were too short for capacity and we were too long for operational. And so I agree with you. There's a point at which something becomes capacity. We could debate what that is, but there shouldn't be any area where you can't get funded at all. So we had a 4-block section that we couldn't do because it was too short for capacity and it was too long for operational. So just one example of where. So to me, it's fine to put it either, but then you have to explicitly make it eligible in capacity. So I'm agnostic on where it goes, but we can't anymore have a gap where you're just not eligible.
Yeah, and we really struggled with this too, I must say. I mean, and part of the reason was these types of projects that just fell through the crack. We know, regionally significant capacity projects are a mile or greater, and we didn't have any mechanism to fund projects that were 1,800 feet to a mile. There was nothing in there in the criteria that suggested we could do that. So, originally we had talked, oh, well, and I think it got back to your original point, Madam Chair, was that, at some point, what's a capacity project and what isn't? And we struggle with that for air quality purposes. I think above a mile, we know that is an air quality. We have to run the models to accommodate that. But we looked at, 3/4 of a mile, but it was so arbitrary. We think, well, then there's going to be projects that fall through the cracks that are 3/4 of a mile to a mile. So we decided to just anything less than a mile, thereby it by definition is not regionally significant, should be considered. But it's important to point out that with this operations criteria, that intersection improvements are still required as part of the project. At the approaches, turn lanes would have to be added. There would have to be significant improvement at the intersections, along with that bottleneck that might be relieved by the widening of a facility for a short distance.
Other comments on this one? I have a couple more if nobody else is jumping in. One is I just want to clarify, I think these projects include BRT, HOV, and Q jumps, but it's not explicitly stated. I just wanted to...
Yes, they do.
Okay. And then I just wanted to flag on page 2 of this where if we were going to change to person hours of travel reduced, that would be where we would do it. I think Will Tour brought up that point and made it very well, that ultimately we want to move people, not single occupancy cars, and so we should be measuring people, not vehicles, because then you're not taking into account transit. Jack's got a furrowed brow.
Yeah, no. Well, my only question becomes, I understand how to count cars. Pretty simple. But how are we going to count people? And we're back to the HOV3 issue again. Who's in the back seat? So my question becomes, then it becomes the local jurisdiction's ability to just say, well, we think our project's going to move 200,000 people. And the point is, with the traffic study in cars, you got a definitive measure, and then you use industry standards to determine what that number is based back to the number of vehicles. So that's my only concern, is I don't know how they get to a people movement on a capacity or operational project.
Robin, did you want to weigh in on this?
I am very new to this PMT, but it's not my understanding that it focuses really on how many people are in cars. It's really about adding the transit ridership. So it's like pretty much each car still does count at one, and then you count the bus or rail or whatever ridership. So to me, it's a model, and VMT is a model. I mean, it is not definitive. It is, we like to think that once we give something an acronym, but
you're talking my language. I get it.
So I think PMT is the exact same. The only thing it's doing is it's allowing you to have the ridership count, because at least on what they call the soft stock rolling, it's like if it's in a bus, then that's what counts. So that's my understanding. It's not that it's about counting people in cars. It's about adding the bus ridership.
Yep.
So,
and we'll have TAC look at this, but I think we got to be able to measure it. So how do we do that? Was that okay? All right. Anything else under roadway operational improvement projects? Make a note that all of the multimodal ones that we spent a lot of time discussing apply for this as well. We don't need to rediscuss them, I don't think. Okay, how about table 6, roadway reconstruction? Okay. Table 7. Oh, I'm going too fast. Sorry. Take a moment. All right, well, I'll take this. You spelled indicator wrong.
What? Where to?
I just wanted to say it before Mayor Tisdale jumped in and pointed that out.
Where was that, Elise?
Top of table 7. I really am just stalling.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Everybody up to table 7? Can we move on to table 8? All right, well, so I'll jump in with, oh, wait, go ahead. Okay, Zan, did you have something on table 8?
Yeah.
Okay.
It has to do, I think it's 8. It has to do with the timelines for getting transit agency support being rather prohibitive.
Can't hear you.
Oh, just the timelines for getting transit agency support seem rather prohibitive.
I have to say that our staff noted that as well and didn't know, because depending on how the timing comes out, you could miss your RTD board meeting for that month and you would not be able to meet this requirement, and wondering why we can't just go back to getting a letter of support in with your application. Why isn't that good enough? So I don't know if that's a TAC question or a staff question, but the people that do this for us don't think this is workable.
Well, we'll take that back to TAC.
I don't know if other folks. Val?
Yes, on that first item in there, do we have a definition for indicator unit? What's an indicator unit?
DRCOG staff will tabulate the project's indicator units within a half-mile buffer around a fixed route transit project.
Remember that long MVIC meeting where we went through these indicators? That's what that's referring to.
Yes.
But
It is, yes. And actually, that is one of the things that you guys sent back to TAC for their consideration and input.
so anything else on table 8? Jackie?
I guess I have an issue with federal money being used to provide new bus service when we can't count on that money. And it's almost, I'm going to equate it to the roadway, oh God, which one is it? Reconstruction projects. So, you know, if you've allowed your roadway to deteriorate to a certain point, you get less, you know, you shouldn't be rewarded for doing that. And I guess in some ways, expanded bus service is one thing to me that should be getting more points than new bus service that we can't count on that is sustainable. I just have a problem with it. So I'm just going to say if TAC's looking at things, that's something I'd like them to wrap their brains around a little bit.
Okay. I guess one other thing on table 8, I would just notice that the convoluted point I made before about routes rather than people that Doug potentially disagrees with and wants to throw to TAC is also relevant under the connectivity section, so to point TAC towards that. All right, how about table 9? Robin.
So just to refresh folks' history, there used to be a separate bike reconstruction category and then a separate new bike ped category. And so we combined them, and part of my understanding was we hadn't had a lot of folks even applying or succeeding in getting the reconstruction. So, one of the things that we think may be behind that in Denver is just the number 3 in the eligibility requirements. So it's the red there on that first page of table 9. It's a pretty strict standard, right? You have to have really, really, really bad pavement, but it doesn't allow reconstruction for any other purpose. And so We actually have congestion on some of our trails. I think some communities, communities may experience that, or a safety issue, right, where you end up having multiple users or multiple uses that no longer makes the trail safe where it is. It's not a new trail, but you have a legitimate reason for reconstruction. So we'd love to have, maybe TAC could think of a way to, you know, provide a reconstruction that's not just based on pavement, but is based on, just like we do for roadways, congestion, operational, safety. If you know, and I think that as vague as it sounds, this is not a scoring criteria. You still have to compete with the scoring criteria that's there. It just allows you to enter the game, because these eligibility criteria are the gate by which you can or can't enter the game. So I'm not talking
Good
about
point.
points for any of that stuff. I'm just saying let those projects compete. So.
Along this, I have a question too. I mean, these are transportation dollars, not money for bike trails, and it doesn't have anything to do with that. But I guess where is the requirement that it actually be solving a transportation problem versus a recreational trail use out on the weekend? Because we have a lot of issues with horses and bikes and people on trails, and I would hate to actually think that our transportation dollars could be used to fund those type of projects when it's not a transportation issue.
Yeah,
So,
by law it's not supposed to be, and that's a good point. We'll add a comment.
Okay.
Table 9.
Okay, Robin, and then
There's no other
Val.
comment on that. Okay. Sorry, the other one, so the next page of Table 9, there's a speed limit section at the bottom of safety, and the... I thought you would like my bike congestion. I thought of that just for you, Jack. So speed limit, this version eliminates the single point for below 30 miles an hour, and it may seem to folks, oh, well, you don't want to award a point below 25 miles an hour because you don't really need a bike facility. We actually try really hard to get our bike facilities off of the higher speed roads and put them on parallel right-of-way that is lower speed limit on purpose. And so, you know, a great example of that is like 16th Ave coming into downtown. We don't want the bike lane on Colfax, but we do want it on 16th Ave. It's 25 miles an hour, and so being able to allow that point back. So we just want the 1 point back for 25 miles an hour, because yeah, and I'm sorry, I did not mean that it didn't matter. I just meant I didn't think people would build a 10-lane road for 1 point, or 10-mile road.
Val, did you have something to add?
Yes, on the pedestrian-only projects, just right above where Robin was talking about, on the 5 points awarded, where it says major regional arterials, it'd be nice if we could include in there, or designated transit corridors. As you know, the North Line, we're now trying to get proactive on that and start building the connectivity from our communities into the approved corridors that's going through there. So if you could put some of that on there, I would appreciate that. On where it says the pedestrian-only projects, 5 points would be awarded for pedestrians. Metrovision, RTP, major regional arterials, and or designated transit corridors.
Or designate.
We have a couple of projects, couple of stations that we are trying to connect our original Thornton over to the 88th station, the 104th station.
Okay, good point. Any more? We're wrapping this up rapidly because we're running out of time.
along those lines, I think there is, if we have urban corridors as well as urban centers, and I know one of my staff commented to me that it's not clear through the document when we say urban center, oh my gosh, what is, let me find his email, but urban centers, we have an urban corridor, so both words should be used, whatever you're saying, an urban center, urban corridors, should also be included throughout the document. It's just a general editing thing.
Okay. How about Table 10? Table 11. All right, last call for specific comments of any kind. Otherwise, we're ready to vote on our motion to send this to TAC with our comments and suggestions and questions for their technical review. Everybody ready? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. Nice work, folks. So we have a couple of informational items that we're going to breeze through in the next 9 minutes. Is that humanly possible?
We definitely want to do the one on regional economic strategy. We can do the urban sim another time.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we'll do the urban sim at another meeting, but we'll do the regional economic strategy now. Thanks for your flexibility.
Yes, I've spent my last sort of 2 months here getting bumped, so I'm really surprised that I actually have even 9 minutes, which is probably 8 by now. We gave you a lot of detail in the packet, largely because I was very much under the impression we would not get to this item.
You're not ready.
So, no, I'm right. No, I'm more.
You're cut.
I heard there was a rumor I might get 15 to 20 minutes, so I prepared that, but I, of course, now don't have that. So I think maybe what I'll do is I will just jump to what would have been my last slide, and you can look over that and see if you have any questions about this overall project. This is really something that we are doing for the first time in quite some time to think about really how our work as DRCOG, as the Metropolitan Planning Organization and the Council of Governments, really does interact with the world of economic development, right? How do we, as an organization, think through those issues and make sure that what we are doing is supporting our efforts to grow and expand businesses in this region. So there's lots of detail in your packet about what's been done so far. We had a series of interviews with economic development organizations from around the region, 12 interviews, over 40 people that participated. Those were municipal level, county, multi-county, regional, and state, a really diverse cross-section of folks that do this work day in and day out. You know, we wanted to be very clear, we are not doing economic development that the traditional economic development community does. That is not what we want to do. That's not the business we want to get into. We have a very rich infrastructure of folks that do that day in and day out. We just simply want to support what they are looking to do. One of the things that we heard very early on is that the planning community and the economic development community are oftentimes promoting the same brand as a region, but we need to get on the same page as to what that brand is and how we mutually support each other. So we've done a lot of interviews. We've been talking quite a bit with our MetroVision Planning and Advisor Committee and some other stakeholders about doing some indicators work to sort of compare our region to the regions that we compete with the most when it comes to business expansions and relocations. There's information in your packet about that. There are 6 that we routinely compete against. You know, one of the things that I talked about, I just envisioned there would be more California cities and regions on that list, but really we actually tend to have more of a reciprocal relationship with California. People will have a California location and a Colorado location. Same thing, we don't necessarily compete with a lot of regions on the East Coast, with Atlanta being sort of the one example that's maybe a little bit different because they tend to have only East Coast operations and not necessarily Midwest or Central or West Coast operations. So, you know, we wanted to understand as a region how are we faring with and thinking through how we compete with those areas, and so that's something that we've been working on. So I just, again, kind of what you're going to be seeing really on June 11th is when we're going to unroll all of this to the board. And, you know, we will talk about not only kind of that indicators, how we're comparing against other regions, but we're also doing some peer region work to understand what similar organizations like DRCOG do with the issue of economic development, right? Very few have a mandate to do this, but they're figuring out, again, very similar to what we're trying to do, what can we do in our work program that ultimately is supportive of that mission. And one of the things that will come back through you that really is an important thing to think about is we want to put forth some recommendations about what is our role, strategy, or policies that we reflect in MetroVision and ultimately in our day-to-day work program that spells out these things. So again, June 11th, you'll be hearing a lot about this, and with us sort of hearing obviously the issues the board might raise, and then we will work to a final report at the end of July, and with the hope that a lot of this gets rolled into MetroVision 2040.
Just one quick question, Brad. You mentioned a lot of the jurisdictions. You didn't necessarily mention the chambers or the economic development groups that are outside of the jurisdictions. In the 40 that you're talking about, do they include folks like on the Economic Development Corp?
Yes, these were governmental and non-governmental as well.
Jackie?
And I know I've heard a lot of feedback from the economic development community about the 25% 50% goal that's in MetroVision, and that they didn't think that that was realistic or reasonable. So are they going to help us try and, I mean, is this document the intent to help us kind of define a goal that the economic development community would, I mean, it's our goal. I understand DRCOG will develop it, but I'd really like to get their input on that instead of kind of saying, hey, that sounds like a good idea, let's try and achieve it. And then everything we do is wedded to something that was just somebody's good idea versus something that's really attainable and achievable and makes sense for the region from the ED perspective. And is that really what we're hoping to?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key piece of this, when I talk about roles, policies, and strategies, those are really reflecting on what we have on the books right now, right? How do we potentially shape or change slightly sort of our orientation or the goals that we put forward that ultimately meshes more or is more in line with what the economic development community sees as either feasible or what that vision or goal might look like. The struggle is that one of the things that came up very clear in the interviews is planners and economic development folks just speak a different language.
Right.
One is very long range, one is opportunistic. And we have to get someplace where those things can overlap to some degree.
And one of the things, I've been to a few of these ED conferences where we hear the site selectors speak, and one of the things that we are continually complimented for is our transit system. So I do think that there's a role for transportation in economic development, and there's a natural link there. So it does make sense to me, and I think the more we can trumpet that, the better off we are as a region. So
yeah, one of the things that really struck with me, I had a we talked with Metro Denver EDC very early in this process to understand, is this fit with something that would be of value to the region and to your individual members? And what really was the thing that echoed to me that resonated was good planning is good for economic development, right? It sort of comes back to the site selection thing. It's the thing that gets you on the radar, right, is that you have this robust transportation network. You are considering quality growth and quality communities and have a diversity of communities. All those things are the things that get you just in the door. Then some real business issues take over in terms of what their needs are. Do they need a rail spur? Do they need, are they a high water user? Those are different conversations. Yeah.
Val?
Just to piggyback on Jackie's comment, when we did our north line, it was supposed to be I guess groundbreaking. It was more of a spike pulling ceremony. Okay, I happened to run into two gentlemen. Actually, there was about 3 of them from Irvine, California, that just come in just to kind of view the things, what's going on, and they were telling me that that's what they do. They just follow the transit lines wherever they're opening up in the United States, and they just immediately go down up in there to see what they can develop around. So it makes a big, huge difference.
Any other final comments? If not, thank you, Brad,
thank you.
for your very flexible presentation on that. We look forward to hearing
Happy to
more
get some
about
time.
it June 11th. So our next meeting is June 4th, unless you have anything else, Jennifer? Oh, Jack does.
2 things I would like to talk about, and she got out of here too darn fast, but most of us didn't know. But Nancy, this was her last meeting. So I just noticed she snuck out on us very nicely. So anyhow,
can we write a letter?
We will. We're going to have to do something.
No, I meant to get her back.
So I was looking down, and I looked up, and she's gone. I said, well, you sneaky little devil.
Well,
But the other thing is that everyone who applied for the MBIC committee, I told Jennifer, this is the kind of a committee we need participation, not selectivity. So I just told her, please, whoever's on that list, approve it and get them all down here. So that's what we did. So that will be
Careful what you ask for.
I know, but you know what? It's yeah. So that's what we did. Okay.
And they'll be officially approved by the full board in 2 weeks.
Full board, that's correct.
So we'll have friends joining us. Great.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So just a quick comment here from the Peanut Gallery. So I guess the June meeting will officially be on MVIC. But in fact, there's a possibility that I may miss that meeting, just a public announcement for the board. So my wife and I are expecting our first child sometime in the next 3 weeks. So in the event that my luck changes here, I'll probably miss the next meeting. Thank you.
Well, and I will not be there either. I'm going to my son's destination wedding in Dominican Republic, and hopefully shortly thereafter they'll be expecting their first child. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, yeah, I hear you.
Thanks, everyone. Meeting is adjourned.